It is Medical Monday with Dr. David Gnewikow from Advanced Hearing Solutions in Mount Juliet, talking about hearing loss day. We have another caller on the line. Greg is with us tonight. Hi, Greg. What's your question?
Hi. I have extreme ringing in my ears, and loud noises in the background have a tendency to make things very difficult to hear voices when I'm watching TV or talking to people.
Sure.
I'm wondering what are the things that I can do that will help me improve that ringing in my ears.
Excellent question, Greg.
Let me just say, I'm going to put you on hold so you can listen to your TV, okay, Greg? It may work better that way. So just know, go ahead and turn back up your TV.
Okay, so I'll just say that's an excellent question. We get quite a few questions about ringing in the ears. The term is called tinnitus. That's kind of the medical term for ringing in the ears. First, let me say, generally, tinnitus is a sign of hearing loss. It usually accompanies some type of hearing loss. It's usually a sign that there is some damage going on in the inner ear. So we were talking a few minutes ago about causes of hearing loss. That can be genetic, it can be noise, it can be it can be medications. A lot of different things can sort of trigger that tinnitus. But when you say I have ringing in the ears and I have trouble, hearing in a noisy situation, to me that says the tinnitus and the hearing loss are kind of going together. This is a hard concept to understand. I'll try to make it sort of simple. It is my belief and my understanding that the tinnitus is not what causes it to be hard to understand in noise. It's likely hearing loss that causes it to be hard to understand in noise, and the tinnitus accompanies that. I know that's sort of a fine differentiation there, but regardless, what's happening to you in noise is you're not getting the information that somebody with good hearing is. We talked a few minutes ago, I don't know if you heard our initial conversation, but we talked about hearing loss and understanding what people are saying really being sort of this math problem. And that is, let's just say, for example, your hearing loss / tinnitus, whichever the cause is, causes you to miss 35–40% of what's being said. Well, when you listen to me with my loud bass voice and your TV turned up, you can understand me fine in this situation. That doesn't mean you're hearing every single syllable, but our brains get enough to fully understand what somebody is saying. I've got all these neat examples. It's harder to do on television, but I do them in my office to say, last Saturday I went to the lake and I caught a big, what's the word? Well, everybody knows the word is fish. How do you know that word? You didn't hear it, your brain fills in the blank. So my point is, in easier situations, like listening to a male talker on TV or talking one-on-one with somebody, it's easier to compensate for hearing loss. But when we put background noise, a noisy restaurant, riding in a car into the equation, it's that the hearing loss takes away some information, and so does the hearing loss. And so your hearing loss that you could compensate for in a quiet situation, now that noise takes away another 20% and it gets much, much harder. So to answer your question, I think I'm answering your question, is what can be done about it. I wish I had the magic cure for tinnitus. We get this question almost every time I'm on the show because so many people live with it. I personally have tinnitus, have had it for 24 years nonstop, so I know what it sounds like, I know what it's like to live with it. There is not a cure. I can't say you need to, do these exercises or take these pills. The very most effective treatment for tinnitus is actually using hearing aids. And this is not me giving you a sales gimmick, that's what the science says. And people say, well, why would a hearing aid help with ringing in my ears? The simple answer is, by giving people more sound, you hear more outside sound rather than what's happening internally. So I'm going to use myself as an example, which I do quite regularly. I have a 50 decibel hearing loss in my left ear that came from somebody shooting a rifle right next to my ear when I was 20 years old. So my tinnitus started then. It's been going on ever since. It's my little pet that lives inside my head that rings at me all the time. Well, I'm 44, so a few years ago, hearing kind of started to catch up with me. I started wearing a hearing aid about 2 years ago. It literally, my tinnitus increases 100% when I take my hearing aid out. And this is not, again, it's not magic, it's not mysterious why that happens. It's because when that's in, I can hear Right now I can hear the air in the vents in the studio. You know, I can hear us shuffling around at the table. I can hear other things going on, and that has what we call a masking effect on the ringing in the ears. Just like I'll say for Greg, it's Greg,
yes.
right? Okay, I'll say for Greg, if you're in a noisy place, you probably don't hear the ringing as much. A lot of people will turn on a fan at night to help them sleep because it helps cover up the ringing. So by increasing hearing, we tend to mask out that ringing. I hope that helps. That was a very long explanation, but I hope that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. We have so many people that call in about it that I notice so bothersome. People, how do I just make this go away? Right. I'm so sick of hearing it.
Absolutely.
So it absolutely can help. Let's talk about the hearing test that you do in the office and how it may differentiate from maybe what people have experienced before.
Sure. So there is sort of a basic, what we call test battery for hearing tests that any licensed reputable professional is going to do. You know, we do several different things with a hearing test. Number one is I need to understand, I will use the term here, hearing loss, and that is what is the actual decibel level? We talked with Jeff earlier, I believe, about a decibel level. You know, what decibel level can somebody hear? At what level do they stop being able to hear that? It's not a complicated test, but it tells us how much loss of hearing there is. We do that at a number of different pitches or frequencies of sound. I think a lot of people think of hearing loss as everything is quiet. But what happens is when we lose high pitches, which is what most people lose, it's not a loss of volume, it is a loss of clarity. So most people that I test might have, I'm just going to use some numbers, might be able to hear 30 decibels for the low pitches. That's close to normal, maybe not perfect, but they can't hear 70 decibels for the high pitches, which means they have more trouble picking up high pitches versus low pitches. That makes several things happen. It makes you be able to hear parts of words. So vowel sounds, ah, e, sounds like that are low pitch and loud, but consonant sounds like S's and TH sounds and F sounds are much harder to hear. So when we do a hearing test, that's what we're looking for, is not only what is the hearing level, but what is the hearing level at specific frequencies. When we turn to talk about hearing aids, we prescribe hearing aids based on that sort of pattern of hearing loss so that we're not turning everything up. Hearing aids are not loud. Hearing aids are supposed to be clear. If they're fit right, it's clear, not loud, because we're giving back those individual frequencies. We also test what we call word understanding or word recognition. So that goes back to my kind of differentiation between hearing loss is one thing and understanding is another. We want to understand, if I give you a list of words at a good, loud, clear level, what is the understanding ability? That is a big predictor of success using hearing aids. If I have a patient who has a 70 decibel hearing loss, which is significant, but they can still understand 90% of words, they're a slam dunk with a hearing aid, because all I got to do is turn it up and their understanding ability is really good. If you know somebody, or if somebody listening here has said, I have tried hearing aids so many times and it's always been very difficult to understand, sometimes that's an understanding problem, not just a volume problem. And I have patients who, when we do this word understanding test, get 20%, 30%, even though the sound is loud enough for them. And that's a sign of damage in the inner ear. And it's much harder, I won't say it's hard to help those people, it's much harder to bring them up to hearing 80, 90, 95% than it is somebody with good understanding. So we do a number of different tests as well to, I'm going to say, diagnose the problem. So not just say, hey, you have a hearing loss and you need some hearing aids. Is there a medical problem going on? So we're going to do an inspection of the ear. We do something called bone conduction testing, something called tympanometry. All of these things are looking at, is there a medical problem that needs to be addressed? Do you need to be referred, for an infection? Is there something wrong mechanically? Is there somebody else we need to refer you to? Or is this simply what we call a sensory neural hearing loss that we've been talking about, for which hearing aids may be the best option?
And you do this little microphone test.
Okay, so.
Which sounds wild.
Yeah, you need to come to the office sometime and we'll do that with you. So that particular test is called a probe microphone test. And we've talked about that a few times on this show. That is about fitting the hearing aids.
Okay.
So once we go through that big long process that I just bored you with, that is the process of testing the hearing. That helps us establish a prescription. So just like when you go to the eye doctor, they're going to do a test with you and find out what level, but then they're also looking for astigmatism and nearsightedness and farsightedness. When we do a hearing test, the eye doctor does that to create a prescription. We do that hearing test to create a prescription. But how do you know that you're making that prescription work for that patient? That's where the test you just talked about.
Okay.
So that's called a probe microphone test. And I will say this to anybody listening: if you have hearing aids that were fit and this test was not done, it is likely your hearing aids are not fit as well as they could be. So a probe microphone test is, I sit a patient down in front of a computer system with speakers. We put a microphone on the ear and we put a microphone in the ear. Now that sounds terrible. We're not shoving a big microphone in your ear. It's a tiny little tube. You can barely feel it, just sort of tickles. But then we put the hearing aid on top of that microphone.
Okay.
Then I can present noises. I can present voices. I can have your spouse talk and measure what that hearing aid is doing. I can play music and measure what it is doing. But it allows us to measure, what are you really hearing? And so many of the people that I've seen that have come in with hearing aids, you know, that they got somewhere else, are like, well, I've never had this test done. The person I saw always said, well, how does that sound? Is it too loud? And turned it down and turned it up. And not being critical about that, but there's no way to truly know how well those devices are fit unless this probe microphone test has been done. And it is the gold standard. It is recommended by every protocol from every major organization in the hearing industry, yet it's only done about 30% of the time.
Really?
And that, yes, and that has to do, I guess, with the cost of equipment. I've got 2 systems and each one of them cost about $15,000, you know, so there's some cost in that. But our results are so much better because we can use that. I mean, I literally use it 30 times a day.
Wow.
For almost every patient that comes in.
And you have told me before that with hearing aids these days, you shouldn't be sitting there turning them up and down and fiddling with them all the time. I think that has been an annoyance to a lot of people over the years.
Absolutely. So I hate the word hearing aid. I mean, this is what I do for a living, and I think it's a terrible word because it has this connotation of, you remember when you were a kid and you're sitting in church and that guy's hearing aid in front of you was squealing, you know. Or my grandpa, when we used to walk in the house, we could hear his hearing aid squealing in the next room. Okay, today's technology, if it is fit correctly, which goes back to that conversation we just had, should never screech, never whistle, should never be painful or uncomfortable. Most hearing aids today, you don't have to adjust at all. You put them in, you go. So during the break, we were talking about, I went to Disney to the national cheer competition last week with my 18-year-old daughter who's a cheerleader. And Carrie said, well, did you have to take your hearing aid out for that? And the answer is no. I just walk in there with it with thousands of screaming cheerleaders, and the hearing aid adjusts to that situation. So today's technology, again, when it is fit correctly, allows the devices to adapt to soft sounds and loud sounds and music and wind noise, and I could go on and on. Not to say it's completely wrong if you have a hearing aid that you have to adjust. I just feel like my basic philosophy is the easier the better.
Sure.
And not for everybody. There are people that really like to mess with their hearing aids and adjust them, and I've got apps that they can control them and turn them up and down. But I would say of our patients that we see, 70% of them, we set them completely automatic. They never touch the device other than to put it in and take it out. And they're very happy with that because they're not that guy who was messing with it or having to fiddle with it.
Good. Okay, we have to take another quick break. We will be right back after this. If you have a call, if you have a question, go ahead and give us a call right now, 615-737-PLUS.